He always had control. Every word measured, every gesture calculated. It was as if he danced on a board where all the pieces responded to him. He knew exactly how to make others bend to his will, how to spark interest, how to manipulate emotions. It was almost automatic. But with her, none of that worked. From the beginning, he noticed something different. He tried the smile that always broke down barriers, the phrases that made people let their guard down, the charm that put him at the center of any attention. But she remained unmoved, unreachable. It wasn't a matter of resistance. It was as if she simply saw through all of it, as if she knew exactly what lay behind what he showed. He found himself disarmed, lost in a territory where his tactics had no value. And for the first time it bothered him. It wasn't something he was used to feeling. With others, it was enough to adjust the approach, recalibrate the gestures, seek a new strategy. But with her, no matter how much he tried, the feeling was always the same. Nothing had any effect. She looked at him differently. Not with disdain, but with a calm that seemed to penetrate straight through the layers he worked so hard to keep intact. There was something about her that didn't respond to the game, something that said, without words, that there was no room for manipulations there. This left him conflicted. Part of him wanted to insist, to prove that he could break this barrier. Another part was being forced to face something he always avoided, his own vulnerability. Because in trying to break her down, he began to realize that the one being exposed was himself. With her, there was no room for subterfuge. She wasn't there to impress him, nor to be impressed. The truth was all that mattered, and that disarmed him in a way he had never experienced before. For the first time, he felt the weight of the emptiness behind his own games, and yet he couldn't stay away. There was something about her that pulled him back, something that made every attempt at control seem small, insignificant. It wasn't about changing who he was, it was about the way she made him feel. As if, for the first time, he needed to stop running. He was at a point he had never known before. Continue playing even knowing it wouldn't work, or lay down the cards and reveal himself for real. He kept trying. Maybe out of stubbornness, maybe out of fear of showing himself, but the truth was clear. The tricks that had always worked simply had no effect, and that bothered him. Not because he didn't know how to lose, but because with her it seemed like he wasn't even playing. It was something different, something he didn't know how to control. She stayed there, unperturbed. There was no disdain, no sense of superiority. There was just a firm presence that didn't yield but also didn't push away. He realized that she wasn't trying to win or challenge. She wasn't trying to change or impress. She simply was. And that, more than any rejection, affected him, because it forced him to look inside, to question the reasons behind every move he made. With every attempt, he found himself more disarmed, and at the same time more fascinated, because she didn't follow the script he expected, didn't react like other people, those he had already learned to predict. She didn't play, didn't try to manipulate or conquer. She just existed in such an authentic way that he couldn't ignore it, and it was this authenticity that attracted and terrified him at the same time, because it made him see something he was trying to hide, even from himself. All that facade, that control, that unwavering confidence, everything seemed so fragile in front of her, and this left him in conflict. On one hand, he wanted to keep trying. After all, that's what he always did. Keep adjusting, trying to find the weak spot, the loophole that would allow him to regain control. But on the other hand, he knew that with her, that wouldn't work. Because she didn't have weak points, not the kind he was used to exploiting. With her, any attempt at manipulation seemed silly, almost childish. And she knew it. She knew exactly what he was trying to do. But instead of confronting him, she just watched him, not with judgment, but with a calm curiosity, almost as if she were waiting for him to realize on his own that he didn't need to continue that way. And that's when something started to change in him. Because for the first time, he didn't just want to win. He didn't just want to prove that he could get what he wanted. For the first time, he wanted to understand. He wanted to know why with her everything was so different. He wanted to know what made her so immune to the tricks that worked with everyone else. He began to realize that, to be with her, he would need to be different. Not because she demanded it, but because he knew that with her there was no room for the superficial. He knew that to truly get close, he would need to lower his defenses, take off the mask, And that scared him, because deep down, he knew that this mask was all he had. It was what protected him, what made him feel in control. Taking it off meant exposing himself. It meant showing parts of himself that he didn't even know how to deal with. It meant risking being truly seen. And he didn't know if he was ready for that. But at the same time, he knew he didn't want to lose this connection. He knew he didn't want to give up what he was feeling, even though he didn't know how to deal with it. She made him want to be better without ever asking for it. She made him question everything he believed about himself, about others, about what it meant to be in a relationship. And so he found himself faced with a choice: to continue insisting on old patterns, knowing that this would get him nowhere with her, or to allow himself to try something different. There were no guarantees. There was no way to know if she would accept him, if he would be enough, if he could be what she needed. But there was something inside him that said it was worth trying. Because with her, it wasn't about control. It wasn't about winning. It was about something he didn't even know he was looking for. Something that, until now, he had avoided out of fear of not being enough. But with her, that fear seemed smaller than the desire to open up. He knew it would be difficult. He knew he didn't know how to do it, that he would make mistakes, that he would probably stumble along the way. But for the first time, he was willing to try. Not because he wanted to win her over, but because he wanted to see where this could take him. He wanted to discover who he could be if he let go of everything he had used to protect himself until now. And as he made this decision, she remained there waiting. Not in a hurry, not with expectation, but with a patience he didn't understand. Because she knew this wasn't something she could force. She knew he needed to get there on his own. And she knew that, when he finally allowed himself to be seen, it would be something real. Now he stood before her, more vulnerable than he had ever been. The rehearsed words, the calculated gestures, all seemed so distant, so irrelevant. What mattered now was what he felt. And for the first time, he let her see that. He let her see the man behind the mask, not knowing what she would do with that, but trusting it was the right thing to do. And her? She just smiled. Not the smile he was used to provoking, but something different. Something that said, "I see you, and that's enough." He was never good at being exposed. He always avoided situations that demanded more than the control he knew how to master. But in that moment, before her, there was no turning back. He realized that everything he had was now insufficient, and the most unsettling fact was that she didn't demand, didn't pressure him. She was simply there, being who she was, as if that was enough to disarm him. He tried to speak, but the words seemed stuck, not because he didn't know what to say. He always knew how to manipulate any conversation to the outcome he wanted. But now, he knew there was no room for manipulation, and for the first time he found himself silent, vulnerable, exposed. And that scared him more than anything. She didn't fill the silence. She just looked at him, not with judgment, but with a kind of acceptance he had never experienced before. It was as if she was saying, without words, that she didn't expect perfection, only truth. And that was the hardest part, because he was used to being what others wanted to see, not being himself. But somehow in that moment, he found something within himself that he didn't know he had. A courage that didn't come from the desire to impress, but from the will to try to be real. He knew it wouldn't be perfect, that he would probably make mistakes, that he might not even know where to start. But he knew that with her there was no other choice. He finally spoke. And what came out was not calculated. It was not planned. It was honest. "I don't know how to do this," he said, his voice almost trembling. "With you, I feel different. And that scares me because I'm not in control. I don't know how to be like this. But I want to try." She didn't respond immediately. She just observed him, as if she were absorbing every word. And then, softly, she said, "I never wanted you to know how, I just want you to be. You don't need to be perfect. You just need to be yourself." Those words affected him in a way he didn't expect, because no one had ever said that before. It was always about what he could do, what he could offer, how he could manipulate things to his advantage. But with her, it was different. She didn't want anything other than what he already was. And that, more than anything else, was what made him want to stay. The following days were a mixture of discomfort and discovery. He still tried, instinctively, to revert to old patterns, saying what he thought she wanted to hear, doing what he thought would impress her, but she always noticed. She always brought him back to what really mattered, not with criticism, but with that firm patience he was still learning to accept. And he started to realize that, little by little, he was changing. Not because she demanded it, but because he wanted to. Because with her, he felt like he had finally found something real. Something that didn't need to be conquered or manipulated, but simply lived. Of course, he was still afraid that he wouldn't be enough, that he would mess everything up, that she would see something in his vulnerability that would make her want to leave. But at the same time, he knew he couldn't go back to the way things were. Because now he knew what it felt like to experience something real, and that was something he was not willing to lose. She, on the other hand, continued exactly as she always was. She didn't try to change who he was, and she didn't try to rush the process. She simply supported him in such a subtle and powerful way that he didn't even know how to react, because she didn't want anything from him. She didn't want him to be someone different or to prove anything. She just wanted him to be present, and that was the most liberating and terrifying thing he had ever experienced. Gradually, he began to realize that he didn't need to be perfect, that he didn't need to have all the answers or always be in control. He began to understand that being vulnerable was not weakness, but courage. And more than that, he began to realize that with her he could finally be who he really was. There were moments of doubt, of course, moments when he wondered if she really saw something in him that was worthwhile. But every time he looked into her eyes, he saw something that made him believe she did. He saw a confidence, a calmness, a certainty that he had never encountered in anyone before. And that was what kept him going, what made him try even when it seemed difficult. Because he knew that with her it was worth it. He knew that with her he had something he had never had before, the chance to be truly seen. He still didn't know where this would lead them. He didn't know if he could be everything she deserved, but for the first time, he was willing to try. Not for her, but for himself. Because with her, he was finally beginning to understand what it meant to be real. And in the end, maybe that was what she always wanted. Not someone perfect, but someone willing to be imperfect. Someone who understood that, with her, it wasn't about playing games, but about surrendering. And at that moment, he knew he was ready to do just that. And at that moment, he finally understood. The control he so valued was never what mattered. Not with her. Not with what he was building there. He realized that the walls he had built to protect himself also kept him trapped. But with her, those walls were crumbling, and he was beginning to accept that this was what needed to happen. He still didn't know exactly how to deal with all of this, but for the first time it didn't matter, because he was learning that he didn't need to have all the answers. He was learning that vulnerability was not a flaw, but a strength, that being truly seen was scary, but also liberating. She didn't expect him to be perfect. She didn't expect him to know what to do or how to do it. All she wanted was for him to be himself. And that was what he was starting to want too, to be real, to be authentic. And for the first time he was ready to be. Now it's up to you. I want to know, have you ever found yourself in a similar situation? Have you ever been in front of someone who made you see parts of yourself that you were avoiding? How was it to face that? Leave your experience in the comments, because these exchanges make all the difference. And if this message touched you in any way, subscribe to the channel. That way, you won't miss the next content that will continue to explore these real emotions, these human connections that transform our lives. Leave your like. It really helps the channel to grow and reach more people who might need to hear this right now. Share your ideas, your stories. Let's build something true together.